Good evening. Today we pick up in the Gospel of Luke where we left last weekend. And Jesus is giving his major teaching, his major sermon, that is called the Sermon on the Plain in the Gospel of Luke. In the Gospel of Matthew, it's called the Sermon on the Mount. Now, Jesus comes to us today as a wisdom teacher, and he wants to give his followers practical advice. And Jesus chooses today a subject that is quite challenging. Now, most of the people who hear the words of Jesus today or read them would say, yes, but lovely. However, the teaching is challenging. And in fact, no one has ever said anything like this before Jesus and after Jesus. It's unique to him. Jesus is talking about love. But today, he's talking about loving not just the people who love you back, not just the people who like you, not just the people who agree with you, but the people who think the way you think. He challenges us to love everyone, even people whom we may judge difficult in some way to love, for good reason or no reason at all. And this is what Jesus says to us today. Love your enemies. Do good to them. Then he quotes the golden rule and he says, do to others as you would have them do to you. And then he kind of gives us a rationale for his teaching. For if you love those who love you, what credit, actually in Greek, it could also be translated as gift. What credit or gift is that to you if you just love people that love you? Now, it is true that loving people who love you back, even though sometimes we have challenges even in those relationships, by and large, loving people who love you back is relatively easy. We do it all the time. And everybody can do it. But loving people in your life, and it may be a coworker, it may be a family member, it may be a fellow parishioner, or another student in your school, or a neighbor next door, who is not as easy to love, that is challenging. And actually, we all struggle with loving people who do not treat us well. It's not that easy. Now, this teaching on loving your enemies was probably as controversial when Jesus preached it 2,000 years ago as it is today. But this is what Jesus said. Now, interestingly enough, the commandment to love your enemies appears only 3 times in the New Testament. Twice in the Gospel of Luke, which we heard today, and once in the Gospel of Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount. That's it. The Gospel of John never mentions the commandment. Jesus talks about loving one another as he has loved us, but he never directly speaks of loving your enemies, though probably one another also means enemies, not just friends. St. Paul, even though he writes a lot about love, never ever mentions the commandment to love your enemies. He comes close to speak about it when he writes his first letter to Corinthians. In chapter 13, he talks about love. And he says, love is patient, love is kind, love does not brood over injuries, is not inflated, does not seek its own interests. So, Paul comes very close to the idea of loving your enemies, but he never directly quotes Jesus. Even though this commandment is mentioned only 3 times and only in 2 Gospels, from the very beginning, it has been a foundational teaching for the followers of Christ. That's what Jesus calls us to do. And we cannot pretend that he didn't say it. We cannot ignore the teaching. He did say it. So where do you even begin to think about this idea? How do you even start? Now, people would expect Jesus to say a lot of different things. People had expectations of Jesus, as probably we do. But no one expected this one, that Jesus would take these 2 words, love and enemy, and put them together next to each other as a commandment. No one expected this. But here is an important principle, that God oftentimes invites his people, and that includes you and me, to do something that they do not expect. That God will always want to try to raise our expectations. That God will always challenge us to do something that we may not be initially willing to do. Because that's who God is. And that's where the teaching on love of enemies comes in. It is a challenging one, but nonetheless, we are called to live by it. Now, the second important thing is this, that when Jesus talks about loving your enemies, or people who disagree with you, or who might have hurt you, or who might have done something wrong, when Jesus talks about it, he doesn't talk about having a good feeling or the feeling of love for those people or for the enemy. Rather, it is an invitation to try to act lovingly toward everyone, even the people who might have done something wrong. So it's not about having a feeling of love, but it's about doing good. It's not about having good feelings, but it's about doing good. And Jesus actually makes that point in the examples that he gives us. He said, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. Notice these are all actions. These are not feelings, So again, It is an invitation to grow in our own lives from loving people who love us to loving all people, including people who are not that easy to love. Trying to act lovingly toward them to the best of our ability. Trying to always respond with love, as challenging as it can be sometimes. And it is. It can be very challenging. It can be very difficult. Now, Jesus continues, and he gives us some other examples of what it means to love your enemies. He says, stop judging and you will not be judged. Stop condemning and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. Notice again, it's not about feelings. These are all actions. It's about doing good, not judging, not condemning, forgiving. Now, Father Richard Rohr, who is a great spiritual writer, once was asked this question. Somebody asked him, if you were to give one advice to someone, what would that advice be? And he thought for a second, and without hesitation, he said these three words: do not judge. Now, that's another difficult one, isn't it? That's another challenging one. It's not that easy. But I do believe that deep down, we all desire and want to live in a world where we don't have to judge other people. Because you and I, we know from experience that that does not make life easy, that it actually makes life heavy. And I think that sometimes when you think about the idea of not judging others, if you think about it, okay, I'm never gonna judge anyone, it can be kind of overwhelming. How am I supposed to do it? How can I commit myself to never judging anyone? I would suggest that there is a better way to approach it, a better way to start living that commandment, simply by trying this. Day in and day out, try this, to judge less, to simply judge less. When people disagree with you, when they do something that may be wrong, when they may speak ill of you, just try to judge less. Someone once said something that I also believe can help us to have judgment-free life. And this, in and of itself, it's actually a great piece of wisdom and a great advice. And this person said this. I'm not sure who it was. It might have been Sister Helen Projan, who works with prisoners on a death row. She said this: we are all, always, more than the worst thing we have ever done. Just think about it again. We are all, no exception, always more than the worst thing we might have done. And to be able to see that more in the other person who disagrees with you, with whom you might have had a fight, to see that more in the other person may be exactly what Jesus means when he says, do not judge, do not condemn, forgive. Because when we do that, we draw from what is best within us. And that is exactly how God sees you and how God sees me and how God sees others. God always sees more. I mean, I love that idea. I don't just kind of take it and just think about this idea that God always sees more than the mistake and the wrong we might have done. I mean, it's powerful. That's why God is always willing to forgive, no matter what. And that's why Jesus calls us to imitate God, to imitate God's attitude, God's way of loving, and God's way of seeing. And Jesus knows that. That's why he says this: be merciful, not just as anyone, but be merciful as your Father in heaven is merciful.